on?
Nope, there we go. I got it. It's recording.
Okay.
By all means, you can get started. I'll let you start this one.
So this right here was my favorite lesson. I am biased. I have to start by saying that. I have to be honest. I'm very biased because I love project-based learning. I believe that when you give the kids a project that is applied to the real world in some type of way, the interest in the buy-in is immediately there, which really, really kind of releases the teacher to kind of facilitate the learning, and to answer those one-off questions that might kind of be thrown out there. I was excited that you utilize the ideas that we talked about in the previous lesson when you were talking about art with the kids, and I just fell in love. The one thing that really would have kind of elevated it to the next level would have been if you would have kind of researched art jobs, even in the district or just kind of like around the area, to give the kids more of a concrete idea, like, oh, people really do this for a living. People really do get paid for putting these murals out. You know, they get sought out to find locations to beautify the community. And what does that do on the bigger scale of the community, right? Like, by putting a mural in Southeast, what does that do to Anacostia when they do that? What does that do to Columbia Heights by putting this particular piece here? You know what I mean? I love the addition of the history piece. You know, it's not just any mural that they're putting there. They're putting cultural, enriched murals there for a purpose. So I felt like by giving them that real world connection of like, this is what is on Indeed right now, this is how much that salary looks like, would have invested them to the point where the fidelity of the work and the fidelity of the learning experience would have just been concrete.
Okay.
I loved the use of your digital tools, the Prezi. It was interesting to me that through Teach Now, right, they give us a lot of different ways to display our work digitally. Whether we're mind mapping or, you know, whether there is, you know, Zooming, whatever it is. I was interested let me ask, did you think about using any of those pieces for the kids to collaborate, or was it just for presentation purposes?
The purpose of Prezi was, one of my students had told me last year, oh, I have a Prezi account. And so I thought it would be something that majority of them would have or could easily have. And my goal was to get them familiar with it so that they can say, oh, I have an account. I remember doing this with Miss McGee in math, and they can use it in the future. So it was more so of its long-term ability for them, more than just the moment. Because I do projects with my class, and Prezi is one of the projects they have to do because they have to build me a business. They have to tell me about a business as a group, and there's different pieces that they're going to be doing with it. So I wanted to introduce Prezi during that moment, just so they can get experience, but also they created their accounts right then and there. So it would just make it easier once I start tasking them, because the majority of them are in one or the other of my 8th grade classes. So now they can be the person that goes around and helps the others when we actually use it in class for breakout, versus me having to be the one, like you said, being the instructor, be more the facilitator.
Do they have Gmail accounts?
Yes, they all have Gmail accounts.
So I'm gonna challenge you to now think of technology not just for presentation purposes, but truly for collaboration. When I think about this generation, I think about this particular project, right? If we add those skills that we know that they're gonna be needed for the future, when they are trying to get jobs, you know, when they're 20-something years old. And digital collaboration is definitely one of those skills that they're going to need. So how awesome would it have been to use something like Kaggle or Google Site, which is through Google Drive, where they actually create a website where they get to actually work on as if it's a drive, you know, they can share it. And it could be information that they add to it. And it's just one huge webpage about like art and mural in DC, where each one of them has something to contribute to that. Just thinking about more of how can they collaborate digitally, I think would have also taken this to the next level.
I agree with that. I like that idea.
Yeah. The other pieces, I mean, I don't need to say anything else. Like the literacy across the curriculum, like outstanding. Like, I mean, you had them read the text. You had to go back through the text. You had them kind of like annotate and things of that nature. I would just say give them a more purposeful annotation. So instead of just maybe underlining and highlighting, just really thinking about anytime that you see a math term, like pulling out that academic language and kind of building back on that, absolutely. And bringing it back to them that, yes, we're in math, even though we are reading something about art and we're reading something about history. But just kind of giving them those, you know, that purposeful annotation as they read, I think is great. You know, like I said, you knocked it out the park when it came to the interdisciplinary themes. Like I just love this lesson. Like this lesson is a pure reason why we as teachers need to do more collaboration through different content, because when they get into this job force, so when they move on, you know, out of high school, wherever they go, they're not going to be doing something singular, you know, it's not going to be, this is just math. So no, this is math, and you need to pull in some ELA, you need to pull in some art, you need to pull in some history, you need to pull into some science in order to be successful.
I agree with all of that. That is so true. And I tell them that all the time, that every component doesn't stand alone, but you need to know the language of each one of them. They speak differently. They don't talk the same. So I agree with you 100% on that as well. I will say that for the digital piece, for my project that they're doing in class as an assignment, their groups, they have to, they are collaborating on a Google page. So each account is connected, and they also have to connect mine as well. So they have my work email up there. So I'm able to have access to go in and see what it is that they're doing and they're not doing. So I try to encourage them to do collaborations regularly. You should be doing stuff outside of class, not just in here with me, because we don't always have time.
Right.
So I'm trying to encourage that, but of course, you know, it's an uphill battle. They'll have to be forced to do it more so later, more than be compliant now. That is one of my biggest issues, is getting my students to invest in themselves. And that's what I tell them education is. It's a self-investment. So I have a little bit of buy-in from some, but not most. But I just think it's a learned behavior. If you weren't requested to have that investment throughout all these years, then I'm finally asking you to invest. It's kind of hard when they've just been given answers or just been taught to the test, and now I'm trying to be the different teacher and bring in things that they're not used to seeing. So I will say that, you know, I keep on pushing, and I tell them until I see you reach your potential. And it doesn't even have to be full potential, but you have to show me something, because everybody has the ability to learn something.
Right.
You know, so I really believe in my students and what they can do. So I just keep that at the forefront of my focus. And we go from there every day. So yeah, I agree with exactly what you said. I did like that lesson more.
Mm-hmm.
I was really impressed with my number 6. Honestly, I loved it. But yeah, I'm starting to get more comfortable with the way teaching now is wanting me to implement. And when it's more student involved, I love it. It's great, but I could see how it would be definitely useful if parents were more involved in the educational piece
Mm-hmm.
as to how, you get home and have your child explain to you what they learned that day, at least something. Um, I could see how that can definitely make a big difference because now they're having to do the communication of what they learned, and if you can explain it, then you understand it.
So let me ask you this. What did you notice about your student learning in the last 2 lessons prior, based off of like what you did prior? Like what have you noticed about student learning in the classroom?
That release piece is
Mm-hmm.
huge. But the thing is that I did release last year because with the Eureka model that we use in the district,
Mm-hmm.
that's the way Eureka's designed. Students
Yeah.
are supposed to have productive struggle, figure it out on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're supposed to go in and teach a lesson tailored to what it is that they're missing. And that's just like tidbits. It's not supposed to be a whole lesson. More so just giving clarity and then letting them go
Mm-hmm.
back, collaborate with other peers. I tell them all that they're all specialists.
Mm-hmm.
They're all specialists in math.
Mm-hmm.
Find another specialist to get help before you come to me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
the supervisor. You don't come to the supervisor unless you really need something.
Right.
So
Right.
they I had a class last year that this model worked great, but it's because they wanted to learn and they were eager to try it themselves because they felt that if they could do it themselves, then that needed less of me. And once they realized that and I got through the push, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not, well, you're supposed to be in the front of the room teaching, you're the teacher, and
Right.
getting through
Right.
all the lip. Once we got through that, and I would say it took literally about 3 to 4 months, I would say right around Christmas break, when everybody started being cohesive. And it was smooth sailing the rest of the year. Like literally, I would try to stand up and teach a lesson. They're like, "No, we got this. Have a seat, Miss McGee." They didn't even want me teaching because they wanted to do it themselves because I had gotten so used to it.
Right.
I pushed them because they were my higher performing students, and I know that they could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the only ones that passed Park last year. All the kids that resisted me trying to do this model,
Yeah.
they didn't succeed. And so I do believe it is effective and it is definitely useful.
So what have you noticed about your instructional practice and connected to the student learning piece?
I'm more of, I want to get back to the way it was last year where it was more of them teaching themselves and them asking me for clarity. That's really what I want because I feel like I can bring you the lessons, the ideas, and the creativity of how to bring something about, but I need you to be willing to challenge yourself above what I present to you.
Okay.
And then I feel like I want to do more projects. I want to be able to bring in more diversity in the learning so that they can do that. So I feel like for me, one of my goals is this summer is to start planning out more lessons in advance so I don't feel the pressure of having to plan a lesson on the weekend or right before. But
Mm-hmm.
my goal is to start lesson planning once I take my last practice exam for SPED. And that's mid-June. I'm going to start planning then up until when school starts. Hopefully I'll have the first quarter out. I think having all the resources, all the ideas, being able to put it together, then I can let kids pick which ones work best for them to bring about the greatest of themselves. So I think that's my biggest issue is I don't have, I want the differentiation, and I
Mm-hmm.
felt like I utilized that more in lesson 6.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I loved it, and I was like, oh, this is how I can make it different so everybody can do well. but get the same concept and get the same stuff. So,
Okay.
yeah, I really like it.
So if you had to think about 2 or 3 instructional practices that we've kind of like either talked about or, you know, whether I've suggested in the last, I would say it's been 6 weeks? Oh gosh. To inform your next steps, like what instructional practices do you think that you really kind of honed in on? And then what should I be looking for when it comes to the assessment task?
The assessment task, I would say I was more focused on differentiation.
Okay.
And how to bring that about in something as simple as vocabulary.
Okay.
So I concentrated on academic language because that's still one of the areas that students struggle. And I feel like, you know, back to basics, vocabulary exam. But in this time, instead of just them giving me definitions or sentence, which is normal ELA, I was telling them I want you to give me an exemplar or an illustration.
Okay.
And so when the time comes for assessment, I'm going to take one of the 3 options. Because if my lower students can draw me something that they understand, I feel like it should be sufficient, as well as the higher student who might just be like, I don't have time to do all this drawing. I'm going to just write the definition.
Okay.
But I may have someone who's like, you know what, I remember my sentence. So I felt that, and when I did the dry run with the small group, the students loved it. And one of the students said that she liked the way that she's able to use more than one way to define her understanding. And so that was important to me because sometimes we do forget, like, I know what it means. I can give you an example, but I can't tell you exactly verbally.
Right.
And we can work on that, but you know, as long as you're using the academic language and using it correctly, I think that's what's important.
Okay. All right. Do you have any other questions for me?
No, I do like your haircut though. But I
Hey.
see you. I see you.